Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere old. Older than most of your worries. Older than alarm clocks and deadlines. We're slipping quietly into a Persian caravanserai sometime during the height of the Silk Road, where time moves as slowly as honey, and the loudest sound is the wind brushing against sandstone. You're sore. Every part of you. Your hips feel like they've been arguing with a mule for a week, and your toes are dusted with something that's probably sand, but might also be pulverized goat droppings. You've been walking all day, sometimes riding, but mostly walking, and the desert sun has politely tried to cook you like a clay pot left too long in a kiln. And then, just as your legs threaten a rebellion, you see it. A faint amber flicker against the horizon. A soft, rhythmic gleam. Firelight. Lantern swaying gently behind slatted windows. The silhouette of a tall, squat building emerges low arches, heavy doors, and walls that look like they've seen 100 years of tired people just like you. This must be it. A caravanserai. You trudge closer, the wind pushing against you in little gusts like it's testing whether you've really earned this break. The air smells of dry straw oil lamps and that familiar musk of animals that have traveled too far without enough baths. Somewhere in the distance, you hear a donkey make a sound that could be a complaint or a hiccup, maybe both. You reach the wide entrance. 2 carved wooden doors loom ahead, slightly open. You step over a small stone lip, worn smooth by 1,000 sandaled feet, and the first thing that hits you isn't a sight. It's a smell. Cardamom. Burnt lentils, something vaguely nutty, and a little whisper of mint. It's like stepping into a dream someone once had about soup. A heavy-set man in a wool cap looks up from his stool just inside. His name might be Kamran, or maybe Farid, and he doesn't ask who you are. He just stares at your feet with disapproval and mutters something about mud. He's the gatekeeper. He hates shoes. You shuffle awkwardly and offer a nod that says, both thank you and please don't charge me extra. He waves you through without standing up. Inside, it's quieter than you expected. You thought it would be noisy like a marketplace, but it's more like a temple with indigestion. Quiet conversations echo against stone walls. A baby cries somewhere, but even that feels polite, like it's been told not to wake the travelers. You walk past a courtyard shaded by old fig trees. The air is cooler here, and the fading sun paints the stone walls in pale purples and deep terracottas. You notice a few travelers already bedding down on woven mats. One of them is adjusting his turban with the care of someone who's too tired to get it right but too proud to leave it crooked. There's an open stall to your right. A merchant with an uneven beard is cooking something over a small brazier. You're not sure what it is, but your stomach suddenly has opinions. Loud ones. But before you eat, you need a place to lie down. A young boy, maybe 12, with dusty eyebrows and no shoes, tugs gently at your sleeve. He doesn't say a word, just gestures with his head. You follow him through a narrow hallway that smells faintly of smoke and boiled onions. The walls are cool to the touch, thick enough to keep out both the heat and whatever arguments the neighbors are having. The boy leads you to a side chamber, 3 other travelers already in there. One is snoring. One is humming. One is writing something in a language you can't read. The boy hands you a folded mat and a thin wool blanket. Then he disappears as if he was never there. You spread out your mat, slowly, deliberately. Every movement is a small ceremony. Your joints creak in ways that feel personal. But once you finally lie down, your body sighs like it's been reunited with an old friend. Above you, the ceiling beams are dark with age. You think you see a spider web tremble gently in the breeze. From the courtyard, the low whistle of someone boiling tea drifts in. It's the kind of sound that makes you feel sleepy just hearing it. Your eyelids start to weigh down just a little. But before you drift off, your mind wanders. You wonder how many people have rested on this same spot. How many travelers, merchants, guards, pilgrims, poets, and pickpockets have laid down on the same kind of mat wrapped in the same scent of cumin and camel hair, staring at the same beams, thinking the same sleepy thoughts. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, what time is it where you are, and where are you listening from? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyes close halfway. You hear a pigeon flutter somewhere in the rafters. And just before sleep takes you entirely, you hear a whisper from the hallway. Someone's arrived late, but you'll find out more about them soon enough. The next morning, or what might be the morning time, behaves differently here. You're nudged awake by something subtle. Not a noise, not a touch, just the feeling of air shifting, coolness moving across your cheeks like silk drawn through your fingers. The scent of damp earth and last night's lentils hangs in the air. Outside your chamber, the stone archway hums. That's not metaphor. It actually hums. It's a low, soft vibration like someone plucking a giant harp string from behind the wall. It vibrates in your jaw more than your ears. You're not the only one who hears it. The older man across the room opens one eye, rolls it skyward in annoyance, and mutters something about wind spirits playing games again. You rise slowly, joints creaking in sequence. The hallway beyond your chamber is still dim, lit only by one flickering oil lamp shaped like a tulip. You pad across the uneven stone floor, trying not to disturb a pair of slippers that clearly belong to someone else, but are now directly in your path as if daring you to trip. As you reach the courtyard, you see it again, that archway. Wide, solid, carved from yellow limestone and weathered into smoothness. It frames the entrance like a jaw with no teeth. And sure enough, the wind is threading through a narrow crack between the stones, making it sing. You stand there for a moment and just listen. It's not unpleasant. More like the sigh of an old friend telling you a long story without words. The kind of sound that lingers in the back of your mind for days, then shows up in your dreams disguised as music. Kamran, the gatekeeper from last night, is still there, still sitting on that same stool. You think he might actually sleep there, arms folded, head occasionally bobbing forward like a drowsy chicken. Today, he's holding a brass teacup. He doesn't look at you. He just sips noisily. Then he gestures vaguely to the arch. "You hear it?" he mumbles, not waiting for a reply. Always does that when someone important's about to arrive. You blink. Important, he nods into his tea. Last time we had a Persian princess with a temper and a parrot. Before that, a tax collector with a limp and a fondness for candied walnuts. He slurps again. Sometimes it's just a very fat merchant, but the arch knows. You smile. You're not sure if he's serious, or if you've just woken up in a place where the line between fact and fable is always a little smudged. Across the courtyard, another figure is sweeping dust that seems determined to stay. A tall woman in layered robes, face half hidden by a veil, moves in practiced strokes like she's done this for years or centuries. She hums to herself in a minor key, her broom making soft swishes that rhyme with the archway's hum. In the far corner, a pair of goats stare at her unimpressed. You find yourself drawn to the arch, stepping closer until the hum is just under your skin. The stone is warm in places, cold in others, and you spot something strange. A faint groove along the edge, like someone once etched runes into it and then changed their mind halfway through. You run your fingers along the groove. It tingles slightly, but that might just be the cold. A boy appears beside you, sudden and silent, as if he materialized from dust and imagination. He's clutching a scroll that looks far too important for someone wearing socks as gloves. He looks up at you with solemn eyes and says, "The camel has arrived." You blink. What camel? He shrugs like it's obvious. The important one. Of course. He vanishes before you can ask more. Back in the courtyard, the humming deepens. Now it's joined by something else, a low, rhythmic thud like padded hooves. You realize it's not echoing off the walls. It's coming from outside. A caravan. Close. A few other guests stir. Heads poke out from doorways, shawls wrapped hastily over shoulders, half-lidded eyes blinking in the filtered light. You're not the only one drawn toward the strange sound. The soft vibrations and the possibility of someone arriving who matters. Someone whose story might shake the dust loose from the walls. A few moments later, through that archway, the camel steps. It's taller than you expect, all knobby knees and defiant posture. Its saddle is ridiculously elaborate red velvet brass buckles and tassels that sway like they're choreographed. Atop it rides a figure in green robes, face-wrapped except for eyes sharp enough to cut parchment. No one claps. No one bows. They just watch. The gatekeeper lets out a long, thoughtful, "huh," then sips again. Behind the rider are more camels, some carrying crates, others swathed in fabric to shield them from the dust. One is chewing a string that might be part of its own harness. Another seems to be carrying a lute. You wonder if it plays. As the caravan moves slowly through the arch, the humming fades. The arch falls silent, and with that, the new arrivals are here. Whoever they are, whatever stories they carry, they've entered the fold. You don't yet know it, but one of those crates holds something far more interesting than spices. But we'll get to that later. You wander slowly back toward your sleeping mat, the soles of your feet now attuned to the cool rhythm of the stone beneath them. Somewhere behind you, the camels are grunting as they settle in for the evening, the kind of tired nasal complaints only camels can make. You're not sure whether they're upset or just theatrical. The courtyard has shifted. Where it was drowsy and half-empty before, it now breathes with new energy. New rugs are being unrolled with dramatic flaps belongings shaken out with a kind of ritualistic authority. Jars, satchels, bundled silks, even a large metal birdcage that looks entirely too well-traveled. You return to your corner chamber, the one with the uneven window ledge and that faint scent of burnt cinnamon. One of your neighbors is awake now, an older man with a nose like a small mountain and a small braid trailing from behind one ear. He nods at you like you've been sharing rugs since birth. "Bit of a breeze today," he says, although it's more of an observation to the air than a conversation starter. He's right, though. A dry breeze snakes in from the hallway, bringing with it the scent of straw citrus peel and warm stone. It ruffles your blanket, teases the edge of your tunic, and shifts the room's shadows ever so slightly. You sit. You stretch. You yawn, a long, slow yawn that starts in your spine and finishes somewhere behind your eyes. There's a kind of silence here that doesn't feel empty. It feels padded, like everything's been muffled by time and sand. And then someone steps in. She's barefoot with a sash of red tied loosely around her waist and hair braided so tightly it might hum under tension. She's carrying a shallow bowl of what looks like water and rose petals. She places it just beside your mat and gestures at your face, then points at the bowl. You assume this is not a trap. You dip your fingers in. The water is surprisingly cold, shockingly so. You blink as the rose scent stings your nose, and for a moment everything else fades. The ache in your shoulders, the dirt in your fingernails, even the faint thunder of distant hooves. It's just you and the water and a woman who disappears the moment your eyes close. She never says a word. You dab your neck, your temples, you breathe. In the room across the hall, someone sneezes 3 times in a row, then curses in what you think is Armenian. Someone else chuckles. The walls carry the sound softly, like a mother rocking a baby to sleep with a noisy rattle and pretending it's fine. You lie back again. The mat is rough against your arms. A corner pokes you under one shoulder blade. You shift, and a straw reed makes a bold but short-lived attempt at rebellion. But eventually, you settle. You always do. Then you notice them. Eyes. A set of quiet, calm, impossibly patient eyes peeking through the edge of the wooden lattice that separates your chamber from the hallway. You stare back. The face is young, barely more than a boy. Smooth skin, high cheekbones, and the kind of expression that says he's watching not out of curiosity, but duty. A helper, a servant, a spy. You raise an eyebrow in slow challenge. The eyes vanish. Seconds later, a small hand reaches around the edge of the lattice and places something gently at the threshold. A pouch. Round cloth tied with a twist of twine. Then the hand is gone. You lean over and pick it up. It's warm. Inside, 3 dried dates, a curl of candied ginger, and what appears to be a single hazelnut. You smile. Not because of the food, but because someone out there thinks you look hungry and just the right amount of suspicious. You lie back once more and close your eyes, letting the soft murmur of voices float past. They don't form words, not really. Just syllables curled around steam and shadows. You hear someone reciting a poem, something about a bird and a river and a broken sandal, but the words keep dissolving into sleep before they finish. A merchant outside drops a pot. No one yells, no one rushes. They just pick it up and start over. One of your chambermates is lightly snoring, not rhythmically like the night guard, more like someone letting out a series of half-laughs through their nose. It's strangely comforting. And then, almost without noticing, you drift. Not entirely. Not yet. Just enough to forget what time it is. Just enough for the rug beneath you to start feeling like it's floating. And just before your mind surrenders to full sleep, you remember you never did find your left sandal. But someone else did, and they're not giving it back. You wake to the smell of vinegar and lavender. A strange pairing, but not unpleasant. It curls softly around your senses like steam rising off a morning hearth. You blink yourself upright just enough to register that the light has changed again. Amber now, with long slanted shadows that stretch across the courtyard like lazy cats. It must be late afternoon. Your stomach reminds you that dried dates and one suspiciously chewy hazelnut do not constitute breakfast. Outside your chamber, the caravanserai is humming again. Not the arch this time, but the people. Low murmurs, casual laughter, the rustle of cloth and bags being shuffled, repacked, fussed over, tied again. Someone is polishing a brass bowl, with a focus bordering on spiritual. You follow your nose toward a group gathered around a small fire in the courtyard's eastern alcove. It's ringed by baskets of food stacks of flatbread bowls of olives and a blackened pot balanced on crooked bricks. Dinner is being prepared, and you lucky wanderer have arrived just in time for chickpeas and chatter. The man stirring the pot wears an apron that used to be white. His arms are dusted with flour and cumin. He hums tunelessly as he works, occasionally pausing to taste his creation with his pinky and nod with exaggerated self-approval. Someone asks if the stew will be less salty than last night. He glares, mutters something about culinary sabotage, and resumes stirring. You find a place near the fire, grateful for the warmth on your ankles. You sit cross-legged beside a boy with a frayed sash and a girl with ink-stained thumbs. She's scraping a block of salt with a tiny knife, measuring flecks into a palmful of something that might be dried apricots or extremely wrinkled almonds. And just across from you, the fig-scented merchant. He's older, with silver strands in his beard and a gaze that makes you feel like he already knows your worst secret. He stretches out his legs, leans back against a folded saddle, and exhales slowly like someone very proud of having done nothing all day. "You knew?" he asks without looking. You nod. He nods too. "Good stew tonight," he says. "Less fennel. Thank the gods." Someone behind you sneezes, and 3 others instinctively murmur blessings in 3 different languages. Plates begin to appear, worn metal dishes, chipped ceramic bowls, the occasional folded leaf for the extra rustic types. The stew is ladled out thick and heavy. Chickpeas onion a little lamb if the cook is feeling generous. You're handed a round of warm bread, still soft in the center and dusted with sesame seeds. You tear it open, and steam sighs out. You eat slowly. Not because you're pacing yourself, but because chewing requires effort. And effort is a rare, expensive currency in this place. Conversations buzz around the fire, none of them urgent. A man with a missing eyebrow is explaining how his last caravan lost 3 crates of saffron to a badly timed sneeze. A woman in a pale yellow robe counters with a story about a runaway goat that once interrupted an actual wedding procession, somehow ending with someone being married to the wrong cousin. No one seems particularly upset about any of it. The fig-scented merchant pulls out a small cloth pouch and empties its contents into his palm, walnuts, dried figs, and a single orange peel twist that's so glossy it might be lacquered. He offers one to you without a word. You accept it. It tastes like someone once whispered the word fruit near a leather bag. A gentle firelight rhythm begins to settle into the space. Sparks crackle upward like impatient stars. The courtyard tiles soak in the orange glow. Someone begins tuning a two-stringed instrument with the patience of a mountain. And then, the rumors begin. You knew they would. They always do. Tonight's flavor, a prince. Supposedly traveling in disguise. Supposedly carrying a mirror that never fogs even in steam. Supposedly allergic to lentils, but no one has seen him eat anything else. Supposedly staying in the far chamber, the one with the mosaic floor and the broken window latch. You think it's him, someone whispers. Could be. Could be just a merchant with soft hands. Same difference, isn't it? Historians still argue whether traveling nobility ever truly mingled with common merchants along the Silk Road, or whether those tales were just embroidered bedtime stories for traders who craved a little royalty in their broth. There are receipts and records, yes, but no one agrees on the ones that mention gold being paid in the form of poems. Still, you can't help but glance across the courtyard. There, near the shadow of the fig tree, you see a figure reclining alone. Turban wound, tight eyes, closed face lit by firelight and mystery. Could be a prince. Could be someone's cousin from Shiraz with delusions of grandeur. Either way, he's already more interesting than the chickpeas. And tomorrow you'll probably hear a whole new version of who he is, who he isn't, and which spoon he used. But tonight, the fire is warm. The bread is soft. The fig merchant is snoring gently beside his saddle. And your eyelids are slowly losing their uphill battle. You'll sleep soon, but only after you figure out where that humming's coming from again. You wake not because of sound, but because of absence. The fire's gone out. The hum has faded. The clinking of bowls and sleepy conversations have all melted into stillness. What remains is a peculiar silence, the kind that has weight. You sit up, slowly, eyes adjusting to the velvet dark shadows stretching across the inner courtyard. The fig tree now looms like a frozen dancer, and the starlight dapples its leaves in uneven specks. A breeze tiptoes past, bringing with it the faint scent of Ash's cumin and something oddly floral like boiled jasmine. You take a breath, and it settles somewhere deep in your chest, comforting and familiar as if you've been here before in another life, on another rug, under another name. You hear footsteps, soft ones, bare feet against old stone. Turning, you see the ink-stained girl from dinner now carrying a folded linen cloth over her shoulder and a ceramic cup balanced carefully in one hand. She nods as she passes, not saying a word, vanishing down the long corridor toward the south wall. Your stomach reminds you that it's not quite full. As if summoned by this thought, a small clay bowl is placed gently at your side by an unseen hand. Still warm. You peer inside. It's a second serving of stew, thicker now reduced by fire and time. Chunks of something soft and golden bob in the middle, maybe squash, maybe parsnip. It doesn't matter. You're already scooping it up with the last of your bread, which tastes somehow even better cold. And then, as if on cue, the chatter begins again. Not loud, not all at once, just a slow layering of whispers around the fire as a new cluster of travelers emerge from their rooms. These are the night arrivals, the dusk walkers, the ones who prefer to move when the sun isn't burning holes in their thoughts. One of them settles beside you, tall, draped in brown linen face, weathered like leather left too long in the sun. He doesn't speak at first. He just stretches his legs with a slow, luxurious groan that suggests the two of you might be kindred spirits in the church of sore ankles. Eventually he says, "Heard about the ostrich caravan." You blink. Of all the things you expected. They say a prince tried to breed war ostriches, he adds. Didn't go well. You nod, slowly, half smiling. Didn't go far, he chuckles. Didn't go anywhere. Apparently, they sat down and refused to move. Spat on the royal boots. He leans closer conspiratorially. One of them's still loose, somewhere near Yazd. Locals treat it like a minor god. He leans back again, satisfied with this information, and begins picking dirt from beneath his nails using a fork that definitely isn't his. Nearby, a quiet giggle erupts from a girl with cheeks smudged in charcoal. She's overheard the ostrich story. So has the fig merchant, now awake again and noisily clearing his throat as if preparing to announce something important. But instead, he sneezes, loudly, twice, then declares, "I once knew a camel that refused to walk in a straight line unless someone sang to it." And suddenly you're in the middle of what can only be described as soup gossip hour. Everyone has a story and no one cares if it's true. Someone swears that a traveler once bartered an entire bolt of silk for a handful of walnuts only to discover they were filled with pebbles. Another swears that Marco Polo himself stayed at this caravanserai but mistook it for a granary and complained about the bread. You're not sure which parts to believe. It doesn't really matter. You're full. You're warm. The air is soft. The sky above the courtyard is vast and cool, scattered with stars that twinkle like they're in on the joke. And then Bahram arrives. You hadn't seen him yet tonight. The ink-smeared ledger keeper from earlier. He comes tottering into the firelight, clutching a wooden writing board under one arm, robes tucked into his belt like he forgot how chairs work. He has the look of a man who just realized he copied the same name twice and isn't entirely sure how to fix it. He sits down beside you with a huff and begins flipping through his scrolls. "I've got 5 Yassims," he mutters. "None of them can agree on which one is real." You raise an eyebrow. "Yassim." He waves a hand. "Popular name. One's a mule driver. One sells vinegar. One just wandered in and hasn't left." He holds up a sheet. This one paid in rose petals. Who accepts rose petals? You consider. A mule with taste. He snorts a laugh and shakes his head. "We need to start issuing numbers. Jassim 1. Jassim 2. Jassim no. That one smells like lentils. He's Jassim lentil." Bahram continues muttering to himself, scratching little notes onto parchment with a crooked quill. It squeaks every time he writes a K. You wonder if he notices. Probably not. And yet, despite the chaos, the place feels perfectly at ease. This is a place built for people who arrive, late talk, nonsense, eat slow, and sleep deep. It's stitched together with straw mats, smoke-stained walls, and the shared understanding that time doesn't matter when the road has no schedule. The wind changes. A cloud moves across the stars. And the fig merchant sighs in his sleep, muttering something about pigeons and a stolen spoon. You lean back again, belly-warm thoughts, slow, mind softening. And you think tomorrow you might finally find out what's in that fancy crate with the velvet locks. But for now, the soup has settled. The fire has gone to embers. And your eyelids are gently giving up the fight. Somewhere deep in the night, when the moon has slipped halfway behind a cloud and the last fire crackles like it's whispering secrets to the ashes you stir. It's not urgent. Nothing is. You're warm, nestled in your blanket like a forgotten parcel of wool, and sleep, cheek pressed into the side of your hand. But something tugs at your awareness gently like a cat pawing at the edge of a curtain. You open one eye. Bahram is still scribbling. You're not sure if he ever stopped. His crooked quill scratches quietly in the glow of a single clay lamp, casting a warped shadow of his nose across the parchment. Every now and then, he mutters something like, "Jassim lentil may be just imaginary," or remember to ban fig merchant from counting his own figs. You roll onto your side eyes heavy. The room is quieter now. Someone snoring 2 rooms over, slow, deliberate, almost metronomic. You could set a clock to it if clocks had been invented here. Then, faintly a sound. You sit up just enough to listen. Rustling. Not the innocent rustle of wind through dried vines. No. This is the deliberate, paper-like rustle of someone hiding something. You tilt your head toward the direction just past the bathhouse arch near the storage rooms where the light never quite reaches and even the shadows seem to yawn. You throw your blanket aside and rise barefoot and quiet. The stones are cold beneath your feet, the kind of cold that politely suggests you should turn around and go back to bed. But your curiosity, like Bahram's obsession with proper guest logs, refuses to sleep. You slip past the dozing fig merchant who is now using a saddlebag as a foot warmer through the passage lined with worn baskets and sleepy goats and make your way toward the storeroom. The door's ajar. Inside, the smell hits you first. Not unpleasant, just strong clove oil, old wool, maybe dried pomegranate peels. You peek inside. Silks. Stacked bolts of them. Rolled tight, tucked into corners, some embroidered with thread so fine it catches the moonlight like spider silk. There's a small lantern flickering in the far corner, and crouched beside it is a figure hunched over something bundled in blue linen. You recognize him, the courier from the new caravan. The one with the piercing eyes who hadn't said a word since arriving. He's unwrapping something from the bundle with hands that move like they've done this 100 times. You inhale too loudly. He freezes. You freeze. A heartbeat passes. Then he speaks. Low. Even. You're not supposed to be here. You shrug. Neither are most of the goats. He studies you for a moment longer, then perhaps deciding you're more curious than threatening, returns to his task. From the linen, he withdraws. A box. Simple. Cedar wood. Sealed with a wax stamp and a thin red cord. He glances at you again, then at the box. You ever held a message worth more than your entire village? You blink. I haven't even held a village. He smirks almost invisibly and sets the box gently aside. This, he says, was written by a man who thinks he's already dead. And it's going to a woman who probably wishes he were. He doesn't elaborate. He doesn't need to. The box is not large. It could hold a scroll, a will, a poem, a name that undoes a kingdom. You sit on a burlap sack and watch him work. He begins rewrapping the bundle with a reverence usually reserved for relics or pastries. Why the secrecy, you ask? He doesn't look up, because he says someone always wants to open what doesn't belong to them. You glance at a nearby crate of candied walnuts. You'd opened it earlier. Twice. Not everything you mumble. He finishes tying the knot, then reaches for the lamp and cups the flame to snuff it. Darkness folds into the room like a sigh. As you make your way back toward your chamber, he follows at a distance, silent as dust. When you reach the courtyard again, he stops at the archway, rests a hand on the stone, and listens. It's humming again, he murmurs. You nod. You can feel it too, just a whisper of vibration like a memory trying to speak through stone. He doesn't say goodbye, just disappears into the shadows of the west wing, taking the box and its mysteries with him. By the time you return to your mat, Bahram has fallen asleep face down on his ledger. Ink stains blossom across his cheek like an accidental tattoo. The snorer is still snoring. The fig merchant has acquired a second saddlebag, and the wind has changed again, cooler now, brushing gently across your face as you settle back under your blanket. The box still lingers in your thoughts. But tomorrow there's a pigeon post incident that might distract you. You sleep deeper this time. A kind of sleep that folds around your ribs and pulls you gently downward like a wool blanket soaked in lavender tea. You dream of riding a giant pigeon across the Zagros Mountains. It wears a tiny crown and seems smug about something you can't remember. When you wake, it's to the sound of someone arguing with a donkey. The voice is high-pitched and nasal, full of conviction and clearly losing. You blink into the early light filtering through the wooden lattice of your chamber. The sun hasn't quite climbed over the walls yet, but the color of the air has changed, honeyed soft and full of movement. Stretching, you hear the familiar groan of your knees, followed by a small puff of straw from under your mat. You consider whether it's worth brushing your hair and decide against it. The air still smells faintly of last night's stew. And goat. Always goat. Outside, the Caravanserai is already busy with morning rituals. A man in bright blue robes is muttering to himself while brushing a camel that looks deeply unimpressed. A pair of children chase a rolling jar lid across the courtyard, each blaming the other for its escape. The fig merchant has somehow acquired an entirely new hat. You're not sure if it's his or if it's stolen. Either way, it's too small and very proud. You step into the open air and immediately spot Bahram, the ledger keeper. He's standing near the entrance with one sandal missing and a posture that suggests mild despair. "You've seen the bird, haven't you?" he asks without looking at you. You blink. "The bird," he points wearily. You follow his finger. There perched atop the archway is a pigeon. A very fat, very proud-looking pigeon. Its feathers are speckled, its beady eyes glint with mischief, and around one leg is a delicate silver band. It puffs its chest turns in a slow circle and lets out a single coo that sounds distinctly like sarcasm. That pigeon Bahram mutters ate 2 of our messages. 2. Sealed scrolls. One of them had rose ink. You squint. Maybe it has good taste. He rubs his temples. It pecked through the pouch, then stared at me while chewing. Stared. The pigeon flutters down, lands neatly on the ledger table, and immediately begins pecking at an ink blot as if demanding royalties. Apparently, this is a regular thing. Another guest, a young woman with sleeves rolled up and soot on her cheeks, walks past carrying a bundle of feathers and what appears to be a pigeon whistle. She nods at the bird. "I told you not to feed him, Sesame," she says. Bahram groans. He prefers sesame. You make your way to the breakfast table where a few flatbreads are already warming near a brazier. A kettle of tea bubbles gently beside it, the steam rising in soft spirals. A boy with singed eyebrows is trying to separate mint leaves with chopsticks. "Rough night, you ask?" He nods solemnly. The fire spit at me. You pour yourself a cup of tea. It smells like cardamom and citrus peel. You tear off a piece of bread, still warm chewy in the middle, and dip it absently as you listen to the pigeon scandal unfold. The fig merchant arrives with perfect timing. "I once knew a pigeon that could count," he says entirely unprovoked. Used to nod 3 times for barley and twice for lentils. Of course it was blind in one eye and thought I was its cousin. Everyone pauses for a beat, then moves on. Historians still argue whether pigeons were ever truly reliable for communication across long distances in ancient Persia. Some claim their success was more about the sheer volume of birds released, hoping at least one would arrive intact. Others point to carved pigeon lofts in city walls and argue these creatures were once more dependable than human runners, though none have mentioned them eating sealed correspondence. You sit by the fire as the sun climbs higher, bathing the courtyard in soft gold. The pigeon has now migrated to a roof beam and is preening smugly. Bahram is scribbling a note that reads, "Do not trust birds." The soot-cheeked girl is plucking a feather from her tea. And for a moment, you feel perfectly at home among these strange, dusty people and their minor catastrophes. You stretch your legs, sip your tea, and stare up at the wooden beams. Somewhere behind you, someone is humming off-key. And, just as you're thinking the morning couldn't get any more peculiar, a man walks into the courtyard carrying a lute and wearing only one shoe. But we'll talk about him soon. You spot the man with one shoe before you hear him, which is saying something because the shoe he does have is covered in bells. Tiny ones, loud ones, the kind you sew onto costumes if your goal is to never sneak up on anyone ever. He strides into the courtyard like he owns the place, trailing the scent of wood smoke, cheap rosewater, and something distinctly pickled. His tunic is blue with patches of green, his beard is braided with mismatched threads, and he holds his lute like it's both a weapon and a lover. The bells jingle with every step. He plants himself on the edge of the fountain, adjusts his one remaining shoe like it's a throne, and strums the lute once badly. The pigeon flaps away in protest. The fig merchant mid-sip sighs like this has happened before. You exchange glances with Bahram, who shrugs and mutters, "That's Kaveh. He's been leaving for 3 years." Kaveh clears his throat with theatrical gravity. "Ladies, gentlemen, and undecided donkeys. I bring you music from the road, truth from the dust, and possibly ringworm." Unclear, no one claps. A few people shift on their mats. Unfazed, he launches into a tune. To call it music would be generous. The lute is out of tune. The rhythm is suspicious. But the lyrics. Oh, the lyrics. They're oddly specific. There once was a merchant from Kerman who carried too much cardamom. He tripped on a goat split open his coat. and now smells like soup and remorse. The fig merchant raises an eyebrow. Bahram writes something in his ledger. The lute twangs again unconvincingly. You sip your tea, torn between wincing and admiring the sheer nerve of someone who can play that badly and still look pleased about it. But gradually, against all odds, something shifts. People stop talking. The cook's ladle slows. Even the children chasing their rolling jar lid pause beside the camel trough, not because the music gets better, but because it doesn't. Kaveh keeps playing, keeps singing, keeps telling stories that rhyme just enough to be irritating and not quite enough to be clever, and somehow that commitment becomes hypnotic, familiar, cozy even, like an uncle at a wedding who can't dance but really tries. And then, during verse 7, something strange happens. He hits a single note. One clear, perfect, accidental note. It lingers in the air like it's embarrassed to be there, hanging over the courtyard like a soft ribbon of silk. The lute falls quiet. So does Kaveh. He blinks. That wasn't planned, he says. Someone claps. Just once. A pigeon coos. And then Kaveh bows deeply as if he meant for the whole performance to culminate in that one accidental note. The courtyard relaxes again. People chuckle. A few toss him bits of bread. Someone offers a small boiled egg, which he accepts with royal dignity. He walks toward your side of the fountain, adjusting his one shoe and settling beside you with a sigh. The lute now rests across his knees, silent and humbled. You look like someone who knows how to listen, he says. You shrug, or someone who doesn't know how to leave. He laughs a deep, creaky chuckle that sounds like it's been aged in oak. Fair, he says. I've stayed in 50 caravanserais. This one has the best goats. You nod. I think one of them tried to judge me yesterday. He grins. They all judge, especially the brown one. Her name is Soraya. She outranks most of us. You let that sit. The lute shifts as he moves. One of the strings pings softly like it's sighing in its sleep. He leans back, gazing up at the overhang above the fountain. I used to want to be famous, he murmurs. You raise an eyebrow, and now he smirks. Now I just want to be warm and fed and left alone unless someone has really good cheese. A pause. Then he adds more softly. Sometimes that's enough. Historians still debate the social role of traveling musicians on the Silk Road. Were they chroniclers, entertainers, glorified beggars, or sacred fools? Some believe they passed news faster than messengers, embedding coded tales of war and peace inside their songs. Others suggest they were tolerated mainly for their ability to distract guests from the snoring. Whatever Kaveh is, he fits here. The lute, the bells, the one shoe. The stories that don't quite rhyme, they all belong in this strange little world. He offers you the lute suddenly. Wanna try? You hesitate. I don't know how to play. He shrugs. Neither do I. You pluck a string. It sounds like a goat's opinion. You both laugh. And then the wind shifts again. A soft gust ripples through the archway, stirring the dust, fluttering the pigeon's feathers, and nudging something loose in your chest, something tired and grateful and almost ready to sleep again. Kaveh strums once more, this time softer, slower, and from somewhere behind the spice storeroom, a deep, hollow drumbeat answers back. But that's a story for next time. At first, you think it's thunder. A low, thudding sound, steady, spaced out like footsteps from a giant in no particular hurry. You sit up straighter on the fountain's edge, the lute still resting across your lap. Kaveh stops mid-sip of someone else's tea and tilts his head. Thud, thud. A hush settles over the courtyard, not alarmed, just curious. As if everyone agreed to collectively stop chewing and wait. Then the noise rounds the corner and its source becomes clear. It's a camel. Of course it's a camel. But not just any camel. This one is enormous, shaggy, and wearing a red scarf around its neck like a badge of chaotic honor. Its front left leg has a small decorative bell tied to it, nowhere near as noisy as Kaveh's shoe, but with a kind of subtle dignity. and perched atop its back, riding as if born in the saddle, is a hawk. The hawk does not blink. You blink several times on its behalf. The camel lumbers into the center of the courtyard like it owns the lease. Behind it walks a teenage boy, tugging gently on the reins with one hand and balancing a large fish wrapped in wax paper under the other arm. You watch as the boy guides the camel toward the stables with all the energy of someone who's asked to be reassigned to poultry and been denied. Kaveh whistles low. That's Farzan's bird. You glance at him. The hawk. He nods. Tame. Supposedly. Only listens to Farzan. Bites everyone else. Farzan the courier. Kaveh shakes his head. Farzan the fishmonger. He just borrows the camel. You let that sink in. Farzan, a man who apparently deals in both trout and falcons, is not currently visible. But his reputation seems to precede him, and his hawk, based on the way everyone keeps a respectful distance, seems to back it up. The camel stops by the water trough, snorts loudly, and lowers its enormous face toward the fountain. The hawk remains motionless. You, Kaveh, and a nearby goat all continue watching in complete silence. And then the camel blinks very slowly and stares directly at you. It's not threatening exactly, but there's something unsettling about its expression, like it's trying to decide whether you're interesting or edible, or both. And just above its hump, the hawk tilts its head slightly and lets out a single, sharp chirp. Bahram appears beside you holding a fresh sheet of parchment. I'm not logging, that he says firmly. You have to log it, you reply. It doesn't make sense, he hisses. A hawk, on a camel, accompanied by a boy carrying fish. This is not standard inventory. Write it down as creature delivery, suggests Kaveh helpfully. Bahram glares at him. That's what I wrote last time. Historians still argue whether animals like hawks were used symbolically or practically in Silk Road trade. In some accounts, they're markers of prestige status, symbols of noble travelers. In others, they were simply tools trained to hunt, carry messages, or intimidate that one merchant from Samarkand who kept asking for discounts. Farzan's hawk, if it is Farzan's, stretches its wings briefly. Just enough to show you it could scratch your eyes out and be home in time for breakfast. Then it tucks them back in and resumes glaring at the sky. The teenage boy, still holding the fish, sighs. I asked him to hold it, he mutters to no one in particular. Just while I tied my boot. Kaveh nods, and he hasn't given it back. You're about to ask how the hawk took the fish in the first place, but decide not to interrupt what is clearly a difficult morning. A few other guests have gathered to witness the hawk and camel situation. The fig merchant appears with a handful of raisins and offers some to the camel, who ignores him with majestic disinterest. Someone suggests naming the hawk. Someone else suggests a second breakfast. The pigeon flaps indignantly from its perch, clearly feeling upstaged. Eventually, the boy gives up on retrieving the fish. He bows to the camel as if making peace with whatever this is, and shuffles off to find Farzan, presumably to tell him his hawk is now independently employed. The camel drinks, the hawk watches, and then, without a word or warning, both of them turn and saunter back out the way they came. You and Kaveh sit in silence for a moment. Do you think that was real, you ask? He doesn't answer, just lifts the lute and strums a chord that sounds suspiciously like the camel's footsteps. The courtyard exhales, and somewhere near the kitchen, someone drops a spoon. But we'll get back to that particular spoon later. There's something about a quiet afternoon in a caravanserai that wraps itself around your thoughts like soft fabric, wrinkled, sun-warmed, and mildly scented with old cumin. Time seems to loosen here. It no longer marches. It reclines. You're stretched out beside the courtyard fountain again, bellyful hair still lightly perfumed with the smoke of last night's stew. Kaveh has wandered off in pursuit of a lemon that might not be a lemon, and Bahram is scowling at a new scroll with a broken seal and a suspicious footprint. You're watching the clouds. They drift slowly across the sky, lazy and content, occasionally pausing to let the breeze argue with them. You count them without really meaning to, lips forming silent numbers you'll forget by evening. And then you hear it, the sleepiest yawn in the history of yawns. It comes from behind the fig tree. You tilt your head and see him, a small, wiry man, curled up beneath a roll of rugs, blinking against the sunlight like someone surprised that the day had the audacity to continue without his permission. He's new. You'd have remembered him. His hair is the texture of an overused broom. His mustache curls like it was styled by accident, and he's wearing exactly one slipper on the wrong foot. He notices you noticing him and raises a hand in a sleepy wave. Sleep comes with sand in your hair, he says, apropos of nothing. You nod solemnly. And goat in your soup. He grins, then sneezes loudly into his sleeve. Blessings mumbles a passing stable boy. The man sits up slowly, revealing a series of curious details: a tiny brass bell pinned to his collar, a small notebook tucked into his waistband, and a necklace made entirely of mismatched buttons. You gesture to the bundle of rugs he's emerged from. Rough night? He shrugs. Some pillows have opinions. You don't argue. He climbs to his feet with a series of small sighs and begins stretching his arms in slow, deliberate circles like a cat trying to remember how shoulders work. I'm Naveed, he offers. I arrived during the pigeon incident. Unfortunate timing, you reply. He nods. I lost a sandal to bureaucracy. They made me describe it in 3 languages before they'd log it. Did they, you ask? He sighs. Eventually. But Bahram listed it under ornamental poultry. You're not sure whether to be impressed or concerned. Naveed wanders toward the fountain, dips a hand into the water, and then flicks droplets over his face in slow arcs. He sighs again. You ever wake up feeling like you've been drafted into someone else's nap? You nod. Frequently, in fact. He leans back against the edge of the basin, closing his eyes for a long moment. I dreamed I was a date vendor, he murmurs. But the dates kept whispering to each other in Greek. You blink. He continues. One of them told me to change my name. To what? He opens one eye. Milos. You both sit in silence for a while. Birds chirp lazily from the roof beams. A donkey sneezes. Someone strikes a copper bowl in the distance, maybe for cleaning, maybe as a warning to avoid the lentil stew. Your limbs feel heavy in a good way, like sandbags tied to a dream. And just as you're beginning to nod off again, Naveed speaks. You know, he says there's a theory that all the world's stories pass through places like this. You glance at him. Through caravanserais, he nods. They stop here, rest their feet, have some stew, borrow a blanket, and then keep moving. You consider it. It sounds like something that might have been said before, maybe once by a poet, maybe last week by someone who confused stories with stray cats. But it fits here. Somehow, it fits. Historians still argue over the true function of caravanserais. Were they simple rest stops, centers of trade, diplomatic hubs, secret meeting points for the silk-cloaked elite, or just very fancy nap zones with tea, most likely all of the above? You lean back again, the stone warm behind you. Naveed begins to hum something tuneless but comforting. You feel your breath slowing, your muscles uncoiling, and then you feel it. Sand. Just a little. In your hair. Right where your head touched the mat. You smile. Sleep does come with sand in your hair. And maybe, just maybe, with a little Greek whispering date fruit on the side. You close your eyes, letting your thoughts drift like the clouds above you. And just before you fade into that woolly, sun-dappled, half-dream state, you hear Kava return, muttering something about a lemon with a mustache. But that's a conversation for after your nap. You dream of a camel blinking in slow motion. Each blink takes approximately 6 seconds. It's deeply philosophical. The camel never speaks. Yet somehow you understand its meaning. You will never find your other sandal. Let it go. When you wake, you've forgotten the dream's details, but not the feeling, that peculiar blend of peace and mild confusion unique to post-nap revelations. The courtyard is quieter now. The sun's moved past its golden slouch into a more serious, practical afternoon brightness. A few travelers doze under shade canopies. Someone is carefully combing out their beard using what might be a fork. A baby goat naps in the fig tree's shadow, its hooves twitching from whatever dreams goats have, probably involving lettuce. And then there it is again. The blink. You look toward the far stable, and there, positioned perfectly between two sacks of barley, is a camel. The same camel. You're almost certain. Same red scarf, same expression. That deep, unblinking gaze that suggests it knows something about your life you don't. And it blinks. Once. Very, very slowly. You stare back because it feels like the polite thing to do. The camel's handler, an old man with a turban the size of a small tent and the wrinkles of a banyan tree, leans against a post nearby, watching with mild amusement. "Don't stare at her too long," he calls out softly. "She'll start charging you rent." You chuckle. "She yours." He shakes his head. "She belongs to herself. Same as most creatures around here." You nod, unsure if he's being poetic or just practical. Maybe both. He pulls a dried apricot from a pouch and chews it like it owes him money. You rise from your mat and cross the courtyard to get a closer look. The camel doesn't move, doesn't blink again. Just breathes slowly through its nose, emitting the occasional damp snort. There's a small tuft of blue thread tied around one ear. She came from the north, the old man explains, but only walks south. Refuses to go backward. Not even a step. Stubborn wise, he replies. She remembers too much. You offer your hand toward the camel's muzzle. It doesn't flinch. It simply sniffs, then resumes existing with majestic indifference. You feel a tug on your sleeve. A boy stands beside you now, 10, maybe 11, wearing a belt too big for his waist and sandals held together by creative optimism. He looks up at the camel, then at you. "She stared at me yesterday," he says. "Did she?" She blinked once. Just once. You nod seriously. That's how she speaks. The boy's eyes widen. What did she say? You think for a moment. Then she said, "Your shoes untied." He looks down. They're sandals. There are no laces. But he still kneels to check. The old handler laughs softly, a dry, rasping sound like wind through cracked dates. "People get strange around her," he says. "She's seen too much road." Makes you start thinking your thoughts out loud. You look back at the camel. She's still watching. Historians still puzzle over the symbolic role of camels in Persian literature and trade lore. They weren't just beasts of burden, they were icons of resilience, memory, and what one scribe once described as the last creature you want angry at you in a narrow alley. Some travelers believed camels never forgot a face. Others believed they never forgave one. A few superstitious sorts swore camels could smell lies, and occasionally someone would claim their camel had given them life advice. Looking into this one's eyes, you believe it. You ever think about turning back, you ask the handler. He smiles, all the time, but you don't. He shakes his head, because the camel won't. He drops the apricot pit into a small pouch, pats the side of the beast affectionately, and wanders off toward the kitchens, whistling a tune with no melody. You linger a little longer, watching the camel. It shifts its weight from one leg to the other, breathes out through its nose, and just once blinks again. The boy gasps. She spoke again. You smile. What did she say this time? He considers this very seriously. Then she said, "Don't eat the green olives." Wise advice, probably. You and the boy watch the camel for another minute. Then the breeze changes. The pigeon flutters overhead. Somewhere a bowl clatters to the ground. And, just like that, the moment ends. But the camel doesn't forget. You suspect she never does. And tomorrow when the caravan departs, you'll see her again leading the others with quiet authority and no interest in your sandals. But, for now, you return to your mat, the boy skipping behind you chanting softly, "Don't eat the green olives. Don't eat the green olives." It's late afternoon now. The sun leans heavily on the courtyard walls, casting long shadows that stretch like tired cats across the tiles. The fig tree has become a shrine to drowsiness with 3 travelers and a goat asleep beneath its boughs. Someone has draped a scarf over a jug to keep the flies out. The pigeon is dozing. Even the wind has stopped trying. You're on your mat again, half-reclined head resting on a folded cloak that smells like cumin wool and a faint whisper of someone else's perfume. You've reached that special kind of sleepy where the world feels like it's underwater, slow, muffled, and gently distorted. And then she appears. A woman with a toothless smile, a basket of herbs, and eyes so bright they make the sun look lazy. She walks with a confident wobble, the kind that says she's been walking like this longer than you've been alive, and probably through worse terrain. Her robe is patchy but clean faded from lavender to something closer to dust. Tiny bells tinkle from her ankles with each step, though you get the distinct sense she could sneak up on a hawk if she wanted to. She stops near the fire pit where Bahram is arguing with a piece of charcoal. Without asking, she lowers herself cross-legged onto a mat that wasn't there a moment ago. From her basket, she pulls a tin cup, a satchel of dried herbs, and a small cloth bundle. She unwraps the bundle, slowly, deliberately revealing a cluster of tea leaves, a wedge of honeycomb, and several sprigs of thyme still slightly damp. Bahram notices her, goes quiet, then says with clear dread, "Oh no." You watch with growing interest. "She's reading tea again," he whispers to no one in particular. "She always does this," you murmur. "Every 3rd Tuesday," which is impossible because today is a Friday. The woman, who still hasn't said a word, scoops a pinch of thyme into her cup, adds the tea leaves, pours hot water from a kettle that seemingly materialized out of thin air, and stirs the mixture with a twig she also had hidden somewhere. Then, at last, she speaks. "You," she says, pointing directly at you. You blink. "Me." She gestures. Sip, then flip, then listen. Around you, a small audience gathers. Kaveh returns from wherever he was not buying lemons, holding a mango that looks suspicious. The boy with the sandal problem sits cross-legged nearby. Even the pigeon opens one eye. You accept the cup with the reverence one typically reserves for cursed objects. It smells earthy, sharp, confused. You sip. It tastes like boiled secrets. You flip the cup over onto the small saucer she slides under it as instructed. She waits a moment, then lifts it gently. Inside, the tea leaves have clung to the sides of the cup in irregular, soggy patterns, one resembling a bird, another, possibly a donkey wearing a crown. She examines them closely, turning the cup with tiny bird-like hands. Then she begins. "You will soon come into possession of a spoon," she says solemnly. A hush falls over the group. You squint. "Eh?" "Spoon," she nods. "But beware, it is not yours." Someone behind you gasps. She turns the cup again. You will have a chance to trade it for a rug. A murmur runs through the courtyard. But she adds, "If you do, the rug will never be clean." Kaveh leans in. Metaphor. "No," she says flatly. "Actual dirt. Lots of it." You consider asking a follow-up question, but she's already turning the cup again. She squints at the clump of leaves near the rim, clicks her tongue once, and murmurs, "A man with too many scarves will tell you a lie." You immediately think of the fig merchant who currently wears 2 scarves and is pretending not to eavesdrop. She narrows her eyes at the last bit of tea at the bottom of the cup. "And someone will leave something under your mat," she concludes. She wraps up her herb stands with a grunt and disappears around the corner of the kitchen without so much as a goodbye. The group stares at the empty space she left behind like it might start reading tea next. Bahram mutters, "Last time she told me I'd be mistaken for a bucket. Were you?" you ask. He hesitates. 3 times. You sit for a while staring into the empty cup. It no longer smells like anything. The warmth has faded. And yet, you glance down at your mat. Is that a corner of cloth peeking out? You lift the edge and find a small object wrapped in linen. You unwrap it carefully. A spoon. Not new, not polished. Just a well-used, slightly dented brass spoon with a bent neck and a faint engraving of something that might be a palm tree or an accidental stain. Someone behind you whispers, "She was right." You hold it up. Anyone lose a spoon? No answer. You look toward the fig merchant. He suddenly looks very interested in a crack in the wall. You sigh. The wind picks up slightly, stirring dust into tiny eddies that dance across the tiles. A goat sneezes. Somewhere in the distance, a lute string snaps in protest, and you, proud owner of a possibly cursed spoon, wonder what it will cost to trade it for a rug. But we'll deal with that dilemma another time. The spoon sits in your hand like a riddle. It's a bit warm, though you're sure it wasn't a moment ago. Its handle curves slightly left, like it's been dipped too many times into the wrong kind of soup. The little engraving on it definitely resembles something now a sleepy palm tree. A really smug eggplant. You can't be sure. You tuck it into your sash because, frankly, you're not prepared to deal with the emotional weight of a magical kitchen utensil right now. Besides, something far more pressing catches your attention. A man is arguing with a goose. Not just any goose. A very large, very loud, and apparently highly literate goose. You spot them near the edge of the northern wall beside the scribe's alcove, where the daylight filters in at just the right angle to encourage bad handwriting. The man is crouched over a scroll, clearly frustrated. The goose is standing on the scroll. With purpose, with attitude, with webbed feet firmly planted in the ink. The man's robe is tidy, his posture impeccable, and his voice trembles with barely contained rage. "I told you, Morvarid, not again. This ink was imported." The goose honks, loudly. Then it leans down and pecks the edge of the scroll as if underlining something. You wander closer, drawn by the absurdity of it all. The man looks up as you approach. His expression shifts from irritation to resignation. "Ah," he says. "Another witness to my suffering. You introduce yourself." He offers a curt nod. "I'm Khosrow, scribe, copyist, long-suffering uncle to this tyrant in feathers." The goose, Morvarid, fluffs her wings, honks again, and steps deliberately across the scroll. Her webbed feet leave perfect inky impressions between the lines of delicate Persian script. Khosrow gestures helplessly. She has strong opinions about grammar. Is she wrong? You ask, only half joking. He hesitates. Once, in 1372. She's held it against me ever since. The scroll before him is partially blotted, partially pecked, and partially, though unintentionally, amusing. What was meant to be a poetic verse about sunrise now reads more like a stern warning about poultry. She wasn't always like this, he explains. Back in Shiraz, she was quiet, reserved, civilized, but ever since we stopped here, she's been emboldened. Morvarid honks in affirmation, then nips at his sleeve. You crouch beside them. Why do you keep letting her near the ink? He stares at you like you've asked why roofs exist. Because she chooses to be near the ink. I don't let her. I merely survive her. Morvarid plucks something from the ink pot and flicks it at him. Khosrow doesn't flinch. Historians have long debated the quirks of scribes on the Silk Road, particularly in regions where travel climate and errant animals often made proper manuscript copying a test of patience. Some texts survive with strange marginalia doodles, commentary, and, in one case, a thumbprint labeled "Accident Goose." You glance at Khosrow's hand. The ink stains there aren't accidental, they're layered, deliberate. He's clearly good at what he does. Morvarid nudges the scroll again, then flaps her wings, satisfied. Khosrow sighs and begins carefully rolling the parchment back into its case. She's done editing, he says, which means I can begin rewriting. You watch as he unwraps a fresh sheet of parchment and reaches into his satchel for a new quill. This one is already crooked at the tip, probably from previous goose-related trauma. He begins to write. The nib scratches softly against the parchment, each stroke elegant and slow. You sit with him for a while, the kind of silence that's not empty, just companionable. Morvarid oddly settles down beside you, her feathers puffed just enough to indicate reluctant approval. Khosrow writes in a flowing, practiced rhythm, and then he pauses. His quill hovers above the page. Do you remember the crooked quill ink, he asks almost to himself. You tilt your head. He lifts the quill, shows it to you. The nib is bent at just the right angle that the ink runs unevenly, too heavy on the downstroke, too faint on the curl. I had one just like this in Tabriz, he says. Copied a manuscript for a spice merchant. Every time I looped a kaf, the ink would pool at the bottom. It gave the letters a limp. He thought I was insulting his ancestors. Morvarid honks softly like she remembers. Some scripts carry emotion, he continues. Some carry history. And some. He looks at the blot on his sleeve. Some carry poultry. You chuckle. He shrugs. Better than smuggling silks. And then, as if perfectly timed, Morvarid stands, stretches, and waddles across your lap before sauntering off toward the fig tree, leaving behind a single gray feather in your cloak folds. You hold it up. Souvenir, Khosrow says. You nod, or a warning. He returns to his writing. You pocket the feather and rise, letting the quiet return as the scribe continues his work, each loop and line a small act of order in a world where camels blink at you and tea predicts spoons. And just as you begin walking away, Khosrow calls out, "Don't ignore the feather. If it flutters tonight, don't sleep on your back." You pause. Why? He shrugs. Ask the goose. You tuck the feather behind your ear. Not because you believe in goose omens yet, but because it feels like the sort of thing someone in a place like this would do someone who has tea, read to them by strangers, and receives unsolicited cutlery as gifts. The feather is light, a little bent, and smells faintly of ink. Somehow, it feels official. You wander slowly toward the kitchen area, drawn not by hunger but by a scent that has wrapped itself around the courtyard like a shawl made of memories. Something sizzling, something sweet, something suspiciously goaty. As you near the low-domed kitchen structure, a wave of aromas greets you: saffron, onions, cardamom, turmeric, and the ever-present undefinable essence of goat. And there's a reason for that. Because everything here smells like goat. Everything. Not just the stew, not just the walls. Everything. The ladle, the rugs, the spoons. You smell like goat. And not in the romantic pastoral mountain herder sort of way. More like you lost a wrestling match with a cheese wheel and then rolled through a barn. You pause just outside the kitchen where the cooks, 3 of them, are locked in a slow, silent dance of chaos. One chops. One stirs. One just fans smoke away with a palm frond and offers unsolicited life advice. You clear your throat. The stirrer speaks without turning. If you're here to ask about the goat smell, don't. The chopper chimes in. It's in the walls. It's in the ink, adds the fan waver. It's in my soul, mutters the stirrer. They move in eerie synchronization like they've done this for centuries. A dented pot clangs. A kettle whistles. A small sack of cloves topples and is ignored completely. I thought maybe it was just me, you say carefully. They all turn at once. No, they say in chorus. The fan waver gestures to the far side of the room, where a faded, once white linen cloth now lies folded beside a pile of ceramic bowls. That rag, he says, used to be clean. The others nod solemnly. The goat was here before us, says the chopper. Before the roof, adds the stirrer. You glance upward, half expecting to find hoof prints in the ceiling. The fan waver takes a long breath. It came in once during a wedding party. Stuck its head in the soup. Just stared. No one speaks for a moment. The wind shifts. You realize your cloak now smells like goat and burnt chickpeas. The stirrer gestures at a bubbling pot. We call this dish regret and barley. Want some? You hesitate, then nod. A bowl is thrust into your hands before you can second-guess yourself. It's hot, fragrant, and yes, still vaguely goat-adjacent. You take a bite. It's delicious. Oddly comforting. like eating a memory that doesn't belong to you. They watch you eat with a sort of hopeful dread. "Well," asks the chopper. You nod slowly. It tastes like someone's grandmother made it out of spite. They beam. The fan waver gives a small bow. "We aim for passive-aggressive excellence," he says. Behind him, a goat trots past the door frame. No one reacts. It pauses, looks directly at you, then continues on its way with the serene arrogance of a beast that knows it has outlived empires. You finish the bowl. Your eyes water slightly from the spices. You wipe your mouth with the edge of your sleeve, which is now definitely beyond saving. And just before you turn to leave, the stirrer calls out, "Don't wear those shoes into the south wing." You pause. "Why not?" He leans in, lowers his voice. "The goat likes those." You look down at your sandals. They are unfortunately very chewable. I'll keep that in mind. As you step back into the sunlit courtyard, the smell of goat seems to follow you like a polite rumor. You glance toward the fig tree, now hosting a small nap pile of travelers and at least one oblivious cat, and exhale. The breeze ruffles the feather behind your ear. Somewhere, a lute pings a single sour note, and in that moment you realize nothing here escapes the goat. Not parchment, not poetry, not even destiny. But that's the price of staying somewhere unforgettable. And tomorrow you'll try to find a laundry that knows how to wash dignity out of wool. The sun begins its slow descent across the sky, spilling amber light across the courtyard like someone upended a bowl of warm saffron. Everything it touches glows soft, dusty golden. The fig tree sways gently in a breeze that smells like toasted cumin and roasted almonds. You've returned to your mat. Your bowl is empty. Your cloak is at least 40% goat scent by weight. The spoon is still tucked in your sash, slightly warmer than it has any right to be. And now you're bored. Not in a bad way. In a way that only happens after a good meal, a long nap, and the distinct suspicion that nothing else dramatic is going to happen for at least an hour. You hear footsteps, small, eager, mismatched. A boy, barefoot shirt tucked in unevenly, a leather pouch bouncing from his belt skids to a stop in front of you. His hair is sticking up in the back like he slept inside a rolled carpet. He leans in close and whispers, "Do you want to see the secret tunnel?" You blink. There's a secret tunnel. He glances around dramatically as if pigeons might be listening. "Yes," he hisses, "but you can't tell the goat." "Why would I swear it?" You pause, then solemnly declare, "I swear not to tell the goat." Satisfied, he gestures for you to follow. You rise, brushing crumbs from your sash, and trail him past the kitchens, past the fig tree, past a man arguing with a kettle about the concept of boiling too early. The boy ducks into a narrow alley along the outer wall. It smells of chalk and mildew and the vague memory of pickled radish. You follow him as he presses against a stone panel, grunts, and then nothing. He kicks it. Still nothing. Then he whispers, "Push it like you mean it." You do. The panel shifts slightly, groans like a sleepy camel, and opens to reveal a slanted crawl space just wide enough for one overly curious adult and one child with no sense of danger. You both crawl in. It's damp cool and absolutely not a tunnel. It's a closet. Specifically a forgotten, dusty, onion-filled closet. You sneeze. The boy looks around, disappointed. It was longer yesterday. You pick up a withered scallion. Maybe someone cleaned it. He nods gravely. Sabotage. You look around. There are bundles of garlic hanging from the low ceiling, an upturned basket full of onions in various states of despair, and a single sock nailed to the wall with a spoon stuck in it. The boy stares at the spoon. You stare at your own spoon. He looks at you. Yours vibrating, yet you blink. They're not supposed to vibrate. He shrugs. Mine does, usually when someone's lying. You slowly tuck your spoon deeper into your sash. Is this your tunnel, you ask? Was, he says. But now the onions live here. You sit on an overturned crate and lean against a bag of lentils. The boy does the same, producing a dried fig from his pouch and chewing it thoughtfully. "Do you think the camel knows it's famous?" he asks suddenly. You're not sure how to respond. "Which one?" "The one with the eyes. Most of them have eyes." He frowns. "The eyes. The ones that look into your choices." You nod. "Ah, yes, that one." He finishes his fig and pulls a small notebook from his pouch. It's stained and bent, clearly handmade, the kind of thing scribes might scoff at and poets might treasure. Inside are drawings, crude but oddly detailed. A camel with long eyelashes, a pigeon wearing a tiny crown, a spoon labeled "Do Not Eat." "Do you draw these?" you ask. He nods. "I'm documenting things. For who he thinks for a long time. Me. But also maybe the next person who finds the tunnel." You glance around the onion closet. It's not a very exciting tunnel. Yet. He tears a page from the notebook, a sketch of a spoon with wings, and hands it to you. "For your record," he says. You fold it carefully and slide it into your cloak pocket. "I think the tunnel's shrinking," you murmur. He nods. It does that when it's bored. You crawl back out into the courtyard just as the sun reaches the roof tiles. He doesn't follow. He stays behind, adjusting garlic bundles, rearranging onions with great purpose. He waves once distractedly, already working on something new. You return to your mat with the tunnel dust still in your hair, the drawing in your pocket, and the unmistakable smell of fermented shallot clinging to your knees. No one asks where you were, but a goat is watching you very intently. And tomorrow, someone is going to move those onions. But that's a story for the night after next. You're halfway to sleep when the argument begins. Not the loud kind. Not the door-slamming, plate-throwing, deeply personal kind. No, this is quieter, stranger, infinitely more petty. It's coming from the far alcove near the archway, the one with the narrow window and the oil lamp that's always flickering like it's trying to remember a story. You hear it first, the soft clack of wood, a sharp inhale, then a gravelly voice muttering, "That's cheating," and you know it. You sit up, slowly. A second voice responds, silky, exasperated. "How can it be cheating if you made the rules?" You slide your feet into your sandals still warm from the sun and shuffle over. Around the corner you see them. 2 old men. One wrapped in a maroon shawl so thick he could probably survive winter in the Himalayas. The other in a faded green tunic with a collar that's frayed from too many thoughtful finger pulls. Between them, a wooden chessboard resting on a crate. The pieces are mismatched, some carved, some painted, at least one made from a fig stem. The man in maroon leans forward, pointing with a shaky finger. "You can't move the donkey like that." The man in green sighs. "That's not a donkey. That's your bishop. You lost the night when you sat on it yesterday." A pause. Maroon grumbles. "It felt like a donkey." You crouch beside the crate, fascinated. "How long have you two been playing?" you ask. They both look up slowly, blinking as if you've interrupted a sacred ritual. 3 days, says Maroon. 4, says Green. 3.5. Maroon amends. The game doesn't seem very active, you offer. Gently. It's contemplative, Green replies as he nudges a pawn forward by exactly 1 inch. "That pawn was in Damascus last time you touched it," Maroon mutters. You watch in silence as they stare at the board for a long, long time. The sun dips lower. The fig tree shifts in the breeze, and neither man moves. It becomes clear that they are no longer playing against each other. They are playing against time, or memory, or entropy, or maybe just boredom. A young girl passes by and deposits 2 figs on a napkin beside them. Neither man blinks. You look closer at the board. The queen is a chicken figurine. The rook is a bent nail stuck into a walnut shell. One of the pawns is literally a pebble. The donkey, you now realize, is made from a piece of carved soapstone that vaguely resembles a boot. "Do you even remember who's winning?" you ask. "Yes," they say in unison, then glare at each other. "I've captured 7 pieces," says Green. only because I've been distracted by my hernia, says maroon. I told you that wasn't a hernia, it's your pouch of raisins. You wish you had a pouch of raisins. I do have a pouch of raisins. He does. It's by his left elbow. He opens it. He offers you one. You accept it with the solemnity the moment deserves. Historians still puzzle over the significance of games in waystations and caravanserais. Some claim chess was used as a way to negotiate trade disputes without open conflict. Others argue it was simply a way to stay awake until the lentils finished boiling. Here, it's clearly both. You sit with them a while, watching the shadows stretch, watching them forget whose turn it is. At one point, Maroon nudges a piece, then forgets he did, then argues that it was divine intervention. Green accepts this without question, but only because he's fallen asleep with his hand still resting on his queen chicken. You consider moving a piece yourself just to see what would happen. But something stops you. Maybe it's the sacred silence. Maybe it's the fact that you also don't know which piece belongs to which player. Maybe it's because the pigeon is perched on the windowsill watching the game with unnerving intensity. Eventually, you rise to leave. The two old men continue their game or their performance of a game with the dedication of monks reciting verses no one else remembers. You're not sure if the game will ever end. Maybe it's not supposed to. Maybe it's just meant to exist, a fixture of the caravanserai like the fig tree the goats smell and that one wall that hums. You return to your mat, nibbling the raisin, which tastes like it was aged in an old pocket. It's not good, but somehow perfect. The light fades. The board remains. And tomorrow someone will argue that the chicken isn't actually a queen. But that's a debate for after breakfast. The night settles in like a slow exhale. Lanterns flicker to life, one by one, little amber halos floating in the shadows. They glow behind woven screens above doorways under awnings, casting the courtyard in a soft, breathing hush of gold. You lie back on your mat, listening to the chorus of distant coughs, clinking teacups, sleepy animals, and one very determined cat attempting to scale a fig tree for reasons known only to itself. And then, haiku. A single, crisp hiccup slices through the night, followed by a pause, then another hic. You sit up slowly, already suspecting where this is going. Sure enough, near the main archway beneath a half-burned lantern and a worn leather banner advertising boiled lentils, no one knows who hung it, but it's become part of the landscape, stands the night guard. You've seen him before, stocky, half asleep, bundled in a cloak large enough to double as a boat sail. He carries a staff which appears ceremonial at best, and a bell which he never rings unless he wants a second dinner. And he is hiccuping. Relentlessly. He doesn't seem bothered. He paces slowly back and forth, steps, measured gaze, scanning the courtyard in that vague way people scan for danger after 3 cups of tea and half a nap. Hic. He pauses, snorts quietly, and mutters something that might be a curse or might just be a recipe. A boy pokes his head out from behind a tapestry near the wall. "Is it starting again?" he asks. You nod. The boy sighs and disappears. It becomes clear this is not a new phenomenon. The guard, whose name you vaguely remember, is Rostam, or possibly that guy with the bell, clears his throat. Hic. He straightens his spine and resumes his patrol with the weary pride of a man who knows he cannot stop hiccuping and must simply incorporate it into his routine. You decide to follow at a distance. Not for any particular reason, just curiosity. He walks with heavy, deliberate steps like a man whose feet are slightly too honest to lie. His sandals slap against the stone floor in rhythm with his hiccups. Slap, slap, hic. Slap, slap, hic. He mutters as he walks. Gate still closed. Good. Go to sleep. Good. No flaming spoons. Excellent. You lose track of how many laps he makes, but after a while you start to find the sound soothing, predictable, like a kind of sleepy metronome for the night. Slap, slap, hic. Slap, slap, hic. Occasionally he stops near a pillar, rests his head against it for exactly 10 seconds, sighs deeply, and then resumes. At one point, he pulls a fig from his pouch, bites it in half, chews with tremendous ceremony, and hiccups a tiny piece onto his tunic. He doesn't notice. You sit near the edge of the fountain and watch as he completes another lap, adjusts his bell, and hiccups again this time, so forcefully that a pigeon flutters down from the beam above in irritation. The pigeon glares at him. Rostam glares back. "I warned you," he mutters. "Don't nest on the arch. The wind gets ideas." Hick. The pigeon turns its back as if insulted. Rostam continues. You find yourself growing drowsy just watching him. There's something hypnotic about it all, his lumbering patrol, the hiccup-punctuated monologue, the way the courtyard accepts his noises without complaint. The fig tree sighs in the breeze. A camel groans in its sleep. Someone gently plucks a string on a nearby lute just once, like the musical equivalent of a shrug. Hick. You lie back down, letting the rhythm carry you. Slap, slap hick, slap, slap hick. It's oddly comforting. Somewhere in the dark, someone whispers, "He's had them since the apricot incident." You don't know what the apricot incident was. You don't need to. The night settles deeper. The shadows grow longer, thicker. The stars blink overhead, quiet, remote, unimpressed by earthly hiccups. And just as you begin to drift off again, you hear it hick, followed by a quiet, triumphant, "Still got it." You wake to the sound of someone whispering, "Don't step on the carpet, it's full of secrets." It's unclear whether the voice is part of a dream or just an unusually poetic warning. You crack one eye open and see a young merchant tiptoeing across the courtyard with exaggerated care, holding a rolled-up rug like it contains the remains of a particularly fussy prince. He looks around, then drops the carpet in front of Bahram's ledger station and says very softly, "This one's different." Bahram, who is elbow-deep in a stack of conflicting room assignments, doesn't look up. "They're all different," he says flatly. "No," the merchant insists. "This one is ancient." Bahram sighs and finally glances over. "So was my last guest." He still snored. You sit up, slowly rubbing your eyes. The morning sun hasn't fully arrived yet, but the sky is turning that soft, clay-blue color that means someone somewhere is already boiling tea. You shuffle over to see what the fuss is about. The rug has been unrolled. And, to be fair, it does look unusual. It's wider than most, with a pattern that seems to shimmer slightly in the half-light. Not shiny, just oddly layered, like someone wove wind into the fabric. Its edges are frayed, not from use, but from uncertainty. And across the middle, the design isn't symmetrical like most rugs. It's a map, or at least it looks like one. Not a map of roads or cities, but of paths lines that snake like rivers with tiny stitched symbols scattered across them. Suns, stars, open hands, a single stitched eye near the top corner. Kaveh appears behind you carrying his lute like a sleeping baby. "Oh," he says, "it's that one. You've seen this," you ask. He nods. Or dreamt it. Hard to say. The merchant puffs up slightly. It was found behind a wall in Isfahan, wrapped in 2 layers of linen, and a potato sack. Kaveh considers this. Well, if it was a potato sack, it must be authentic. Bahram crouches down, squinting at one of the symbols. This one looks like a spoon. You all stare at it. It does. A perfectly stitched, slightly crooked spoon. You check your sash. Still there, still warm. The merchant continues. Some say this was stitched by travelers over generations, that they added their own signs, their own warnings. It's not a rug, it's a journal. Kaveh tilts his head. It's a blanket of regret. No, says the merchant, it's a carpet of memory. No, says Bahram, it's going to stain my ledger desk if you don't put something under it. You crouch beside the rug, running your fingers over the stitched lines. The texture is rough but soft, like whispers stitched into fabric. Each symbol feels intentional, like it remembers something. You pause at one near the edge, a camel. Next to it, a tiny stitched pigeon. And beside that, a fig. You glance around the courtyard. A camel chews slowly in the corner. A pigeon preens itself on the roof. The fig merchant is currently asleep inside a blanket that used to belong to someone else. You look back at the rug. "This place is on here," you say quietly. The others nod. "Probably more than once," Cave says. "Places like this?" They echo. You trace another line with your finger. It loops, then doubles back, then spirals into what appears to be a stitched question mark. Bahram leans over your shoulder. "That's exactly how I feel about room 4. The merchant beams. "I told you it was different. Does it go anywhere you ask? I mean, can it be followed?" Kaveh shrugs. "If you follow a map stitched by ghosts and snack vendors, you probably deserve whatever you find." The rug shifts slightly in the breeze. The stitched spoon glints faintly like it's trying to wink. You suddenly remember the tea reader's warning. If you trade the spoon for a rug, the rug will never be clean. You stand slowly. You step away. The merchant watches you carefully. You're not tempted. You shake your head. It already knows too much. Bahram begins carefully folding the rug. "We'll store it in the south wing," he mutters. "Not near the goat," someone says. "Nothing is near the goat anymore," Bahram replies. That was a hard lesson. The merchant disappears down the hallway with a satisfied smirk. The rug is gone, but something lingers. A feeling, a memory that doesn't quite belong to you. You return to your mat and reach for your cloak. In the inner fold you find the sketch from the onion closet, the one the boy gave you. The spoon with wings. You unfold it again. This time you notice something small in the corner. A carpet, barely visible, drawn behind the spoon. You close your eyes and decide not to ask any more questions until after your next nap. The sun creeps higher now, brushing warmth across the top of the walls and waking the carved stone lions that guard the courtyard corners. Not real lions, of course, just sculptures worn smooth by wind and pigeons. They stare blankly at the fig tree like it owes them money. You are drifting, not quite awake, not quite asleep. Your spoon has gone quiet. Your cloak smells slightly less like goat than before. And that's when you hear its soft footsteps, gentle humming, and the unmistakable clink of ceramic against stone. You open your eyes to see a traveler approaching the fountain. He walks like poetry. That is to say, slightly unbalanced, oddly rhythmic, and just a little drunk on something invisible. His robe is too loose. His hair is too long. His eyes sparkle with something halfway between mischief and melancholy. He carries a small jug in one hand, a folded scroll in the other, and an ink-stained handkerchief tucked into his sash. He hums as he walks, and for a moment everything else, the guards, the camel, the rug, even the pigeon, falls quiet. Kaveh, seated nearby, squints. "Is that who I think it is?" Bahram peers over his ledger. "If it's who I think it is, we're going to need more tea." You sit up. "Who is he?" Kaveh grins. "Libai." You blink. The Libai. The Tang Dynasty poet, Kaveh shrugs. Or someone pretending to be him. Either way, the man can rhyme like a thunderstorm and drink like a waterfall. The man Libai, or his very talented impersonator, settles by the fountain, uncorks his jug, takes a long sip, and sighs. Then, without invitation, he begins to recite. "Beneath this fig I cast my cup, the leaves my roof, the earth my sup. 1,000 roads I've walked alone, and everyone has smelled like goat." A pause. Then he sips again and burps politely into his sleeve. A small crowd gathers. The man nods to Kaveh. "You still playing that tragic furniture?" Kaveh clutches his lute protectively. "It has character." Libai winks at you. "Don't trust musicians. They steal your sadness and sell it back as songs." You nod slowly. "Good to know." He holds up his scroll. "I wrote this yesterday, but it rained in the ink." He unrolls it. The calligraphy is wild, flowing looped, untamed. It looks more like wind than writing. Libai stares at it proudly. It's a poem, or a very emotional shopping list. Hard to tell. Bahram approaches hesitantly. "Would you like us to log your visit?" Levi waves him off. I go where verses drip from tree branches. And this tree, he gestures to the fig, which drops a fig immediately as if on cue, has excellent taste. Someone whispers, "Didn't he die hundreds of years ago?" Someone else replies, "Time's different in caravanserais." Levi rises and walks barefoot to the edge of the fountain, peering into the water. "They say you can see your future in a still pool," he murmurs. "I saw soup." He glances at you. "What do you see?" You walk to the edge and look in. The water reflects a crooked spoon, a floating feather, a pigeon perched behind you, and most unsettling of all, a small piece of rug thread caught on your sleeve. You meet his eyes. "I think it's complicated." He nods solemnly. "All the best things are." Levi settles on the fountain rim again, scroll in his lap, watching a beetle crawl across a fig leaf like it's composing a verse with every step. "I once wrote a poem so beautiful," he says softly, "it made a fish cry." There's a silence. "Really, you ask?" "No," he says. "But the fish did spit at me. So that's close." You sit beside him. The sun presses gently on your back. He leans toward you conspiratorially. "Do you want to know the secret to good poetry?" You nod. He whispers, "Steal it from someone smarter, but make it rhyme better." You nod again. He pats your shoulder. "You'll be fine." Historians are still unsure whether Levi ever journeyed this far west, or whether his name simply became a kind of placeholder for any wild wandering poet with loose sandals and strong opinions about soup. Some say he wrote verses in desert inns. Others say he was just really bad at directions. But here today, he's real enough. Eventually, he stretches yawns and announces, "I'm going to nap under that laundry line until the wind tells me what to write next." He wanders off barefoot, scroll, trailing behind him jug, swinging from one hand like a lazy pendulum. The courtyard slowly returns to normal. Bahram shakes his head. He's not even staying here. Kaveh tunes his lute by ear and mutters, "I once owed him 12 almonds and a secret." You return to your mat. The sun is higher now, and someone's boiling water near the kitchen again. You pull the feather from behind your ear, run your thumb over the spoon in your sash, and quietly wonder what it would be like to make a beetle cry with a single verse. But that'll have to wait until after your next nap. You fall asleep to the gentle rhythm of someone sweeping. Not the loud kind of sweeping, the kind that conquers dust like it owes them money. No, this is the lazy, meditative kind. Soft strokes, repetitive swishes. Someone sweeping because it's comforting, not because anything truly needs to be clean. When you wake, it's dusk. The sky has traded brightness for blush-cool purples and tired oranges blending overhead, while the first stars peek out like shy guests arriving too early to a party. Somewhere, a pot clinks. A cup is dropped. A donkey snorts so dramatically that you almost applaud. You sit up and stretch. And that's when you hear it. Music. Soft. Tentative. Like someone trying to remember a song they only heard once long ago in a dream, shaped like a staircase. You rise, following the sound which leads you toward the eastern wall. And there, half hidden behind a cracked lattice and a leaning fig cart, you find the source. A boy, maybe 12, maybe 14, dressed in patched linen with dust on his sleeves and focus in his eyes. He's seated cross-legged back straight, cradling a flute made from river reed, cracked slightly near the mouthpiece. He plays in fits and starts 2 notes. Pause, 1, long note, pause, 3, wrong notes in a row, wince. It's terrible and beautiful. The kind of terrible that makes your heart ache because you remember being that bad at something once and how hard you tried anyway. He doesn't notice you at first. He's too wrapped in it. His cheeks puff, his brows furrow. When he flubs a note, he stops, mutters something under his breath, wipes the flute clean with his sleeve, and starts again. The tune drifts across the courtyard like the scent of warm milk. Even the pigeon seems to listen, cocking its head on the roof tile above. You crouch nearby. He finally glances up and startles. "Sorry," he blurts. "I didn't mean to. Was I too loud?" You shake your head. "No, just unexpected. He lowers the flute. I was told to practice far away. You look around. You've succeeded. He snorts softly and stares at the reed in his hands. It's supposed to sound like the wind over the dunes, he says, but it sounds like a donkey choking on porridge. You tilt your head. It's not that bad. He raises an eyebrow. You pause. It's not always that bad. He smiles faintly. My teacher told me the flute doesn't play music. It plays memory. That's poetic. She was drunk. Fair enough. He lifts the flute again, takes a deep breath, and tries a new series of notes. They rise like a staircase and immediately collapse into a heap. He exhales sharply. It's worse when someone's listening. You nod. Everything is. He taps the side of the instrument. It used to belong to my uncle. He played it during sandstorms. Said it kept the camels calm. You glance at the stable. That seems unlikely. He shrugs. Still sounded better than this. You sit with him for a while saying nothing, just listening. He plays again. This time he gets through 4 notes in a row before it cracks on the 5th. He closes his eyes, tries again. 5 notes, then 6. It starts to sound like something like the beginning of a story told without words. The kind of story you can only hear when you're tired and soft and not expecting anything useful. Historians still debate the role of music in caravanserais. Some believe it was simply for entertainment. Others suggest it was a way to pass information melodies encoding news from distant cities, or even smuggled warnings stitched into tunes. One fringe theory claims certain inns employed musicians specifically to soothe aggressive goats. You wouldn't be surprised. You close your eyes as the boy continues to play. A soft breeze catches the edge of the sound and carries it across the stones past the fountain toward the open archway where it mingles with dusk. And just when you think the tune might finally take flight, the boy flubs a high note, grimaces, and lets the flute drop into his lap. He sighs. You open your eyes. He looks up at you. Do you think I'll ever be good? You consider this. Then say, you're already good enough to make the pigeon stay. He looks up. The pigeon is in fact still perched above them, 1 foot tucked in, eyes half closed. The boy smiles. Maybe that's something. You nod. That's everything. He puts the flute down gently beside him and lies back on the mat, staring up at the stars. You follow suit. Above the night is fully arrived now, deep quiet, scattered with pinprick lights that shimmer like someone left too many holes in the sky. And from somewhere near the fig tree, someone quietly begins humming the melody he was trying to play. The next morning begins with feathers. Not metaphorical ones. Actual, literal feathers. You wake to find one stuck to your cheek, another clinging to your sleeve, and a third drifting lazily through the air above your head, like it's trying to decide if it wants to land or keep floating until it finds breakfast. You sit up blinking at a world that has been lightly dusted in white. There are feathers on the fountain, feathers in the fig tree, feathers in Bahram's ink. He is not taking it well. This is sabotage, he mutters, picking one from behind his ear. I was in the middle of alphabetizing the spice debts. Kaveh walks by, carrying a lute that is also feathered somehow. Pigeons, he asks. Too many feathers, Bahram replies. Exploding mattress, too few springs. Pillow fight, too organized. You wander to the edge of the courtyard where a few guests are gathered, sleep crumpled and barefoot, squinting at the sky like it might offer an explanation. It doesn't. Just a faint breeze and the early scent of cardamom tea. Then you spot it. A small tattered cage, tipped on its side. Door open. Beneath it, a name scratched into the dirt in sloppy script. Property of Anoush. You glance around. Who's Anoush? A sleepy voice behind you groans the courier. Arrived 2 days ago. Carried messages tied to weight. Are you saying he lost the pigeons? You nod slowly. Bahram sighs so loudly it startles a goat. We just relabeled the message bags. Kaveh holds up a scroll now peppered with tiny pecks. This one looks like it's been reviewed. A small boy dashes past, arms outstretched, chasing a pigeon that seems perfectly content to fly just high enough to be unreachable and just slow enough to remain infuriating. From a rooftop, a gray pigeon with one pink toe watches you with deep suspicion. It coos once, then takes off flying low over the courtyard just enough to ruffle your hair with the beat of its wings. You watch as it circles twice and lands on the stable roof beside a camel who is clearly unimpressed. The pigeon puffs its chest and begins pecking at a piece of parchment tied to its own leg. "Is that paper?" someone gasps. A ladder is brought out. A man in a robe far too tight for ladder duty volunteers. You all watch in suspense as he climbs, awkwardly reaches for the pigeon, and is immediately rejected. The bird flutters off in a majestic arc, dropping the scroll midair. It lands in the fountain with a splash and immediately unrolls into an illegible soggy mess. Everyone turns to Bahram. He's frozen. "Don't say it," he whispers. Kaveh pats his shoulder. "It's probably not important." Another scroll drops from the roof, then a third, then 6 more. It becomes clear that the birds have turned the south roof into a personal archive. Feathered chaos descends. Scrolls drop into baskets, rugs, teapots. One lands directly in your lap, tied with a ribbon and faintly stained with what smells like apricot. You open it gently. It's not a message. It's a drawing of a camel wearing a hat. The hat looks suspiciously like Bahram's. You hold it up. He stares. Then he walks to the wall and begins quietly writing ration ink until further notice. Historians may not agree on the exact use of pigeons along Silk Road routes. Some describe elaborate roosting towers, coded messages, feathered relays of information between distant cities. Others suggest the birds were mostly decorative and occasionally delicious. But here today, the evidence is clear. Pigeon Post is unreliable, dramatic, and entirely committed to the art of selective delivery. By midday, the courtyard has returned to something resembling normalcy. Scrolls have been dried, sorted, and placed in a large ceramic pot labeled "Possibly Important." The pigeons have calmed now, roosting on high beams like smug bureaucrats. You keep the camel hat drawing, fold it carefully, tuck it beside the spoon, and decide quietly not to ask what message the feathers were trying to deliver. Some things are better left untranslatable. That night, the wind comes early. Not loud, not wild, just present. Like a guest who arrives before the tea is ready and politely insists they don't mind waiting. It brushes in through the archway, slips between columns, swirls under mats, rattles a copper bowl, and makes the fig tree sigh as if it's been holding its breath since breakfast. You wrap your cloak a little tighter. The air carries a chill now, laced with the scent of distant ash lavender and old parchment. Somewhere, a door creaks. Somewhere else, a goat sneezes like it's trying to make a point. And then you hear it again. The wall. That north wall. The one just beside the kitchen nondescript, slightly stained home to an aggressive lichen and an untrustworthy hook used for drying herbs. It's whispering. At first you think it's just the wind. After all, most things whisper in the dark if you give them long enough. But no, this is different. It's subtle, rhythmic, not quite words, but definitely speech-shaped. You approach slowly, one foot after the other, until your hand brushes the wall's uneven surface. It's cool, almost damp, the kind of damp that has nothing to do with water and everything to do with time. The whispers continue. You press your ear gently to the stone. And yes, there it is. A voice, very soft, muffled, possibly speaking Kurdish, or maybe Persian, or something older still tangled with consonants that stick like fig jam and vowels that flicker like candlelight. You hear a name, Tahir. You hear a phrase, left it in the shoes. You hear a snort like someone remembering a joke from 700 years ago and still not quite getting it. You blink, then you step back. The wall is just a wall again. A pigeon flutters by, overhead ruffles its feathers and lets out a disapproving coo. You're not sure if it heard what you heard, but it's certainly pretending like you didn't. Kaveh appears beside you barefoot and chewing on a stick of dried apple. Found the whispering spot, did you? You glance at him. It's real. He shrugs. Real enough. Been muttering since I got here. What's it saying? He leans against the wall. Depends on the day. Sometimes recipes. Sometimes regrets. Once it tried to sell me a saddle. Does anyone else hear it? Kava thinks. The fig merchant says it hums in his dreams. The stable girl claims it speaks in riddles, but only at dawn. Bahram says it's probably gas. You press your hand to the stone again. Nothing. Just silence. Kaveh offers you the rest of his apple stick. You chew on it slowly. I thought I heard a name, you murmur. He nods. Lots of names in there. Some from before the wall was built, some from after. Do you think it's haunted? Probably, he says, but in a tired, bureaucratic way. You imagine a ghost with a ledger whispering policies through centuries of paint and plaster. Kava continues. I once left it a question, carved it into the mortar. What was the question? He grins. Can figs dream you raise an eyebrow? And he pats the wall. I haven't had an answer, but the fig tree's been leaning a little more to the left lately. The wind picks up again, and this time it swirls near your feet, nudging a small pebble across the tiles like a reluctant chess piece. Somewhere deeper in the caravanserai, a door creaks closed, and the wall hums once low like a lullaby with no melody. Historians rarely agree on what stories buildings keep. Some claim old walls absorb memory like bread-soaking broth. Others believe whispers come from wind, from cracks from overactive imagination and bad ventilation. But here tonight, you believe in the whisper. You back away from the wall, slowly your fingers brushing the hem of your cloak, which for some reason now smells faintly of vinegar and violets. You say nothing more. Neither does the wall. But as you return to your mat, the feather behind your ear flutters once, and you wonder if Tahir ever got his shoes back. Tonight, the stars are too bright. Not sharp or blinding, just vivid, like someone wiped the sky clean with a damp cloth and lit every constellation for inspection. They shimmer above the caravanserai in awkward clusters and crooked lines, and one particularly smug star seems to be winking right at you. You lie on your mat arms, folded behind your head, staring up into the celestial mess. And then you hear someone whisper, "That one's definitely a goat." You turn your head. It's the tea reader. She's perched on a woven stool beside the fountain, balancing a tiny brass pot on her knee. Steam coils upward from the spout, and her hair, silver wild and braided with dried herbs, glows slightly in the starlight. You sit up. She sees you. Come stargaze. You'll sleep better afterward. You shuffle over and take a seat on the warm stone beside her. She gestures to the sky. What do you see? You squint. A fish, maybe a boat wrong. That's the great misunderstanding, she says, pointing confidently. You blink. That's not a constellation. Not anymore. She sips her tea, then offers you some. It smells of cinnamon and burnt orange. They say travelers used to name their own stars, she continues. You come through a place, look up, decide which ones are yours, and tell the sky what it means. You nod slowly. So that one's. The spoon, she says without hesitation. See the curve. Slight bend, slightly. Judgmental aura, you laugh softly. And that one, she points again, is the escaping fig. I see it. You don't, she says, but you will. She sets the pot down gently and leans back. I once met a man who swore he could navigate from Samarkand to Jerusalem using only 3 stars and a shoelace. Did it work? He made it to the goat pens behind the kitchen and gave up. But the confidence was inspiring. She sips again. What did you used to believe about stars, you think? That they watched us. She nods approvingly. They do, but only when bored. Above one star twinkles hard like it's trying not to laugh. You sip the tea. It tastes sharp at first, then sleepy like someone soaked a lullaby in clove and lemon peel. Do you ever wish you'd followed one, you ask? A star. She shrugs. I did. Once. It took me to a bakery in Kashgar. Never found better dates. You sit in silence for a while. The night hums gently around you. Somewhere a camel shuffles in its stall. A lute string is plucked and then regretted. A pigeon dreams loudly on the rooftop. The tea reader gestures again. See that zigzagging one you do. That's the whispering wall. Or it used to be. Hard to name a star after something that mumbles. You tilt your head. Do all places have stars named after them? She grins. Only the stubborn ones. You lie back on the stone and let your eyes blur. The stars shift slightly. Not like they're moving, but like they've always been moving, and you just caught them at it. The tea reader begins humming softly. It's not a song, more like a suggestion of one. The kind of melody that smells like sandalwood and rainy parchment. Historians rarely mention stars in relation to caravanserais. They note the architecture, the courtyards, the trading routes, but above it all, every night the same sky passed by, unchanging, unhurried, full of secrets nobody bothered to write down. You sit up again. What's that one, you ask, pointing to a tiny star low on the horizon. She leans forward, squints. That, she says, is probably someone else's problem. You smile. She yawns. Same time tomorrow, she asks. You nod. She gathers her pot, her herbs, and the faint sound of her own humming, then disappears through the archway, feet soft against the tile. You return to your mat, lying down with one hand behind your head and one still faintly warmed by the teacup. Above, the spoon constellation winks again. This time, you wink back. The hour grows late. Even the goats have stopped arguing. That's how you know it's deep night, when silence wraps around the courtyard like a second blanket, and only the brave or foolish are still awake. You are one of them. Not brave. Possibly foolish? You tiptoe across the cool stone, drawn by the faint smell of honey and burnt flour. It leads you predictably to the kitchen. Inside, the coals still glow. A single oil lamp flickers above a narrow counter dusted with cumin and old stories. And crouched over the hearth, squinting into a dented pan, is the midnight cook. You've never seen her by daylight. She's small, broad-shouldered, wears 3 aprons layered over one another like armor. Her hair is bound in a cloth that might once have been red and now prefers not to discuss its past. A scar runs down her left wrist, not dramatic, just old and entirely uninterested in being explained. She glances up. If you're looking for the goat cheese, it ran away. You pause. Literally, she shrugs. Emotionally, you smile and sit on an overturned barrel near the hearth. She's stirring something thick and bubbling. Halva, she mutters, answering your unasked question. For the travelers who arrive with nothing but regrets and a sweet tooth. You inhale deeply. It smells like memory. She nods once. That's the rosewater. You watch in silence as she adds a handful of something from a clay jar marked, "Trust me." Do you always cook this late, you ask? She chuckles. No. Sometimes I just come here to argue with my past decisions. She pulls the pot off the flame and pours the mixture into a wide tray lined with crushed pistachio. The smell is dizzying, sweet-spiced, warm, and oddly comforting, like the perfume of a favorite aunt you never met. She sets the tray aside, wipes her hands on the outermost apron, and finally sits beside you with a sigh that sounds like it's been rehearsed. I once fed a Persian prince, she says. You blink. Really? She nods. He cried into his stew. Because it was that good. Because his mother had the same recipe and wouldn't share it. You both sit in companionable quiet for a moment. Then she mutters, Also, I may have added too much coriander. You chuckle. She glances at you. What do you know about onions? You consider this. They're versatile, emotional, and dangerous when left unattended. Correct. That's why we don't talk about room 7 anymore. She rises, grabs a curved knife, and begins slicing something pale and soft. Not onion, possibly pear, possibly ghost fruit. The Caravanserai has strange imports. "You ever cook for someone important?" she asks. You shake your head. "Just myself." "Good. You're the pickiest guest." She smiles. There's a worn parchment tacked to the beam above the oven. You squint to read it, "Do not question the raisins." You decide not to. The midnight cook scoops a warm piece of halva from the tray and hands it to you with the confidence of someone who never doubts their dessert. You take a bite. It melts. Not in the ordinary way, but in the way stories melt. The way memories melt when someone else finally understands them. Historians rarely record the cooks. They write of rulers and battles of couriers and poets, but not of the woman who made the only warm food someone ate between Kabul and Cairo. Not of the one who stirred rosewater into regret until it tasted like home. But here in this kitchen with cumin on the counter and a pigeon staring through the open window like it wants a sample you remember. You will remember this halva long after the names fade. You finish the piece. She hands you another. This one has a small almond in the center. A surprise. "Life's like that," she says. "Nutty. Hidden." You nod. She starts cleaning, muttering gently at her utensils like they're old comrades. You rise quietly, thank her, and step back into the cool night. The stars have shifted. The fig tree murmurs in its sleep. You return to your mat, licking the last crumb from your thumb. The sweetness lingers. And somewhere in your dreams, someone adds a dash more cinnamon just in case. The morning doesn't so much arrive as it eases in, slowly, softly, like a cat crawling into your blanket when you're too asleep to protest. Light creeps across the courtyard in faint golden streaks, catching on pottery reflecting off brass hinges, and painting everything with the kind of gentle shine usually reserved for memory. You wake to the sound of paper fluttering. Tiny pieces like oversized snowflakes drifting down from the upper balcony. You sit up, brushing one from your chest. It's a page, yellowed, curled at the corners, covered in neat but slightly unhinged handwriting. Another floats past your ear. You follow the trail back to its source. Above, leaning over the balcony railing, stands a woman in a faded scholar's robe and mismatched slippers, muttering to herself as she releases another fistful of notes into the air. Footnotes to nowhere, she sighs. Might as well let them breathe. You call up to her. "Are those important?" She looks down, blinking at you like you just woke her from a centuries-long nap. "They used to be," she says. "Now they're just clutter with opinions." You gather a few of the pages. Some contain diagrams of pulley systems. Others list observations about goat sleeping patterns. One simply reads, "History is just polite gossip written in ink." The scholar descends the stairs moments later, carrying a satchel filled with more paper and what appears to be a half-eaten roll of dried dates. She plunks herself down on a bench, frowns at the sky, and pulls out a quill. "Can't sleep," she says. "Too many thoughts?" She stares at you, offended. "Too many histories. They keep bumping into each other." You offer her one of the pages you caught. She scans it. "Oh, that's from my phase on Mongol horse-milking rituals." She grabs another. "And that's from the flying carpet conspiracy." "Don't judge me." You raise your eyebrows. "Fine," she concedes, "judge me later." You glance at her satchel. "What are you working on now?" She brightens. "The forgotten postal networks of the ancient Levant." That sounds oddly specific. "It's extremely specific," she says proudly, "which is why no one will read it." She takes out a slim booklet bound in twine and pats it affectionately. "But it matters. These people, these runners, these reed-penned recorders, they stitched empires together. Quietly, anonymously, with bad shoes." You sit beside her. She hands you a page. That's a diagram of a message relay saddle. It looks like chaos wrapped in leather. She sighs. "I once spent 3 weeks trying to reconstruct a delivery schedule from a single ink stain on a tax log. Did it work? No. But I discovered a recipe for eggplant dumplings in the margin. So, mixed results." She pulls out a small jar of ink and begins copying something onto a fresh page. Her script is sharp, precise, like someone writing directly onto the air. You watch in silence. Eventually, she says, "Do you ever wonder who decides what gets remembered?" You nod. "All the time. Sometimes I think it's the ones who sleep the least," she mutters, "or the ones with better handwriting." A pigeon lands near her foot. She doesn't flinch. Instead, she pulls a scroll from her sleeve, scribbles a note, ties it to the pigeon's leg, and shoos it off. "Where's that going?" you ask. "No idea," she says. "I write things to the future now." You lie back, head resting on a folded cloak. The scholar continues writing, humming tunelessly under her breath. The papers she released still swirl gently in the courtyard like lazy snow. One flutters onto your chest face up. Every journey needs an archivist, even the sleepy ones. Historians often argue about how much of the past has been lost. Whole libraries burn scrolls, faded memories unspoken. But in places like this where paper still moves and words still cling to ink like they're afraid to vanish, you feel like maybe not everything is gone. You close your eyes. The quill keeps scratching. The breeze keeps reading. And somewhere deep inside a future no one has mapped, yet your name might be footnoted beside the spoon. The last day doesn't announce itself. It just is. You wake to the soft thunk of someone stacking saddlebags, the faint crackle of breakfast flatbread warming on stone, the muted sound of someone giving a farewell hug with too much enthusiasm and not enough balance. It's departure morning. Not yours, not yet. But the caravan is leaving. You sit up slowly, the cool dawn air brushing your cheeks, and watch as the courtyard transforms. Where once there were mats and idle lounging, now there is movement. Measured, practiced, resigned. A boy leads a sleepy camel in a half circle. A merchant adjusts his scarf while trying not to spill walnuts. Kaveh tunes his lute one last time, just in case someone changes their mind about needing a song before they go. Bahram stands with a wax tablet and a frown. He ticks names, crosses others, occasionally mutters something about missing figs or incomplete spoons. You wrap your cloak tighter, watching quietly. Then you spot him, the spoon courier. He's seated under the fig tree, looking at his sandals like they've betrayed him. In his lap is the same travel satchel you saw days ago, patched, battered, slightly more expressive than most luggage. You walk over. He glances up. "Leaving is hard," he says, "even when you've done it 100 times." You nod. "This place grows on you. Like mold," he says. You both chuckle. He pulls something from his bag. It's the spoon, still crooked, still shining faintly in that stubborn way metal does when it refuses to admit it's tired. "I should leave it," he murmurs. You tilt your head. Why, he runs a finger along its edge. "Because I've been carrying it too long. Because some things aren't meant to follow you." You sit beside him. "You don't have to leave it," you say gently. "But you don't have to keep it either." He hesitates. Then with a soft breath he rises, walks to the fountain and places the spoon gently in the water. It sinks with surprising grace. A pigeon lands beside it and pecks approvingly. The courier returns and shrugs. "Well, that's someone else's story now." You nod. The caravan begins to file out through the archway. Wheels rumble, feet scuff, voices fade. Kaveh plays a soft, wandering tune that doesn't seem to start or end. The kind of song that lingers in your ear even after the last note has fled. The courtyard empties slowly. You don't move. You watch as dust settles in places that had just been swept. As shadows slide into spots that used to hold stories. As the fig tree sways gently, shedding one last leaf like punctuation. Bahram walks by holding the ledger. Not leaving, not yet. He nods. Good. Someone needs to remember where the spoon went. The pigeon lets out one final coo. The tea reader passes by her satchel heavy with herbs and secrets. She winks. Stars say, "Stay." You lie back once more. The sun climbs slowly. The quiet returns. But now it's a full quiet. A satisfied one. Not the emptiness of absence, but the fullness of having been. And as your eyes begin to close, you hear the faintest splash from the fountain, as if the spoon, now a part of this place, has just settled into its new role. Historians never wrote about this spoon. They wrote about kings and maps and caravans that crossed deserts, but not about this one silvered thing left behind. And maybe that's fine, because not every story is meant to be recorded. Some are just meant to be slept next to. You breathe deeply. The courtyard breathes with you. A door creaks. Then stillness. Perfect, gentle stillness. So now the courtyard is still. The fig leaves barely stir. The fountain murmurs softly in its sleep. And you're sinking slowly into the warmth of rest. The world around you has dimmed. Not vanished, just softened. Like candlelight behind woven linen. You feel the last footsteps of the day fade into quiet. The last scroll tied, the last star named. Everything you've carried through this long, sleepy story, spoon's feathers, laughter dust, it all grows a little lighter now. Let it float. Let it drift. You've been a traveler through stories, a listener in candlelit kitchens, a watcher of walls that whispered, and pigeons that gossiped, and poets who drank like rivers. And now it's enough. There's nothing else you need to do. No more fig merchants to outsmart, no more couriers to chase, just the sound of your breath, the weight of your blanket, the hush of night wrapping around you like silk. Sleep now. Let your thoughts wander far across deserts you don't have to cross. Let dreams find you like old friends. And if you wake, remember you were here, in the courtyard, where the spoon rests, and all is quiet.